Welcome to the Story Learning Podcast, regular doses of language learning tips and motivation to help you become fluent in any language. With me, Olly Richards. For language programs, books, free resources, and much more, visit StoryLearning.com. Hey guys, welcome back to the show. Great to have you here. Now, you might remember in the last episode, I mentioned that I've been looking into nutrition and the way that affects your memory and its potential impact on language learning. And it occurred to me that actually maybe some of you guys out there might have some ideas or even some experiences. Have you ever kind of made an alteration to your diet that had a really big impact on your learning or something like that? Maybe if you've got any thoughts on that or any personal experience, I'd love to hear it. Please get in touch. You can write to me at olly@iwillteachyoualanguage.com anytime. I'd love to hear from you. We've got a wonderful question today. Let's dive straight in to the question from Zena.
Hi Ollie, my name is Zena and I wanted to know if you have any advice for recovering a forgotten childhood language. I'm told that I spoke Mandarin fairly fluently from the age to 3 to 6, so a very short time and early in life. But we stopped using it at home. I started attending school in English and forgot pretty much all of it, maybe a few words here and there. I'm 26 years old now. I've had some success learning French and Italian, first starting in school and then doing some self-study and conversation lessons on italki, but want to return to Chinese and I'm always hesitant on where to start as it is so different from Romance languages and seems so foreign to me now as an adult. So I wanted to know if A, you have any advice on whether the knowledge I had of Mandarin as a child can be recovered somehow, or B, how to get your basics, how to get started in a language other than a Romance language when you're kind of used to studying those Romance languages, how to get a start in something that is so different from those. Love your show. Looking forward to hearing your answer. Thank you so much.
Okay, Zena, thanks very much for a very, very cool question. And I think the first thing I'd say is if you haven't already, go back and check out episode 62, because in that episode we talked about the questioner wanted to know how to get back on the horse, as it were, after 3 months off studying her target language. So that, I think my reply to that is going to have quite a lot to do, going to have quite a lot of relevance to my reply to you as well. So definitely go back and check that one out. You can find that at iwillteachyoualanguage.com/episode 62. In that case, it was 3 months. In your case, it's like 20 years. So we've got a bigger challenge, perhaps. But it's also a huge opportunity because, you spoke fluent Chinese from the age of 3 to 6. Now, what we know about kids is that when children learn languages, they do it in a very, very intuitive way. They do it in a very, as your mother tongue. It becomes hardwired into your system. And at certain points during your childhood, your body actually shuts down and prevents you from picking up new skills in the language. So, a very well-known example is that of pronunciation in a language. In the vast majority of cases, it's impossible for an adult to develop native-like pronunciation after the age of 14, for example. That's very commonly documented phenomenon. Not completely impossible, but it's exceptionally rare. And I heard recently, my friend Richard was saying that your ability to detect new sounds in your mother tongue actually stops at 8 months, which is kind of crazily early. So all of which is to say that if you spoke fluent Chinese from 3 to 6, then it is in there somewhere and it can almost certainly be resurrected. The difficulty is to know where to start, right? And to know what exactly it is that can be resurrected. That's the hard part, and that's what we have to try and get to the bottom of. So, so that's the positive note to start off on. And also, I don't be too hard on yourself for thinking that, perhaps that you have missed an opportunity or you're at a big disadvantage to other people from a Chinese background. Because, I remember when I was at secondary school, as we call it here, which is your high school, I guess, about 14 years old, a friend of mine from a French family took his A-level French, which is the exam that you take typically when you're 17 or 18. So like 4 years ahead of his time, he took this exam because his family was from France, right? And everybody thought, he's going to ace the exam. But he didn't. I think he got a good grade, but not a great grade. He got a B or a C or something like that. And the reason is because even though he spoke the language fluently at home, he didn't have that academic background. And that's what you need to pass a high school exam, right? So, really, whatever stage you leave a language or you stop actively using a language in childhood, there is going to be a certain gap in your knowledge there. You might be able to speak the language quite well, but not be able to function in it in any kind of formal work or academic scenario. So I just wanted to say that so that you don't feel that, because I didn't detect in your voice that you did at all, but often people do have these kind of negative feelings about having, left behind a language. So yeah, this is the question then. What would you do differently? And, it's a very interesting question. And I think there is an assumption behind your question, though, which is that you should do something differently to anyone else who wanted to learn Chinese because of your background. And honestly, I don't think you should. I think really, if anything, you should just approach learning Chinese just as anybody else would, irrespective of their background. Because we don't have any better place to start, do we, at this stage? This is your kind of best bet. I'm certain that as you start to study and as you go, you're going to start to, you will find certain things easier than someone learning parallel to you without that heritage. But because we don't know what those things are, it's impossible to say, you should approach study in such and such a way. So I'd say, just approach it as you would with any other language and just kind of watch what happens. Just notice when stuff starts to become familiar, because it will. I honestly don't think that given your background, I honestly don't think that it would be smart to set about studying in any other way. You've still got all of the hard work to do, unfortunately. But one thing I would say is that if we're thinking about your best chance of kind of recovering the language that you used to have, the best chance of reactivating what was once there, is going to be going back to the kinds of things that you used to do when you were that age. Now, I'm guessing that from 3 to 6, you used to watch certain cartoons, right? We all watched cartoons when we were that age, right? So I would say, talk to your parents, ask them what you used to be into. Any kind of books you used to read, any TV series or cartoons you used to watch over and over, and try and get hold of those, because I'm sure that if you started looking at those, some memories would be jogged. I've got clear memories from being that age, 5 and 6. So I'm sure that if you can get hold of some of those materials, you're at least, I'm not sure from a linguistic point of view how effective it would be, but it's the best possible place to start. So to go and do that, and if you find out, I'd love to hear what it was. If you find out that you used to watch certain cartoons or whatever, let me know what they were. I'd be fascinated to hear what happens if you can actually get hold of those and re-watch them to see whether your memory is jogged in any way. That would be really interesting to know. So the second part of your question is, well, how do you approach a non-Romance language? And again, I think we have to approach this assuming that you have no special advantage. We have to approach this from the standpoint of anybody else learning a non-Romance language for the first time. And I've got, very direct experience of this. All my first 4 languages were Romance languages. And then I started with Asian languages, and I learned Japanese and Cantonese and then Arabic. And it was, each of those languages was many, many times harder than the Romance languages. I think that if, as I guess you are, you've got experience with Romance languages, you are in for a bit of a shock, to be honest, because everything's different. You've got, obviously, the writing system is completely different. The culture, I imagine you've got a certain familiarity with the culture, but that factors heavily into the language learning process as well. Any of you guys who have heard me talk about my experiences in Japan before will remember that, you can't just learn the language in isolation. You have to learn all about the culture. But also you've got a totally different vocabulary set. You've got a different grammar. Chinese grammar is not particularly challenging compared to other languages, but you do have a huge amount of vocabulary to learn, and then obviously the whole writing system as well. So you've got a lot to cover, and the main thing is that it takes time. I've found with my Asian languages that studying gets you so far, but it's just a question of getting used to the language, giving it time. I tend to find that my familiarity with the language takes leaps forward in sets of 6 months. So after 6 months of doing one particular thing or studying in one particular way, I'll suddenly feel this improvement or this big step forward. And that is such a huge part of it. And I think going into the Chinese learning process, expecting it to be a process that's maybe perhaps as rapid as learning, say, French or Spanish is a mistake. You have to take a longer term view of it. And again, you might like to check out episode 10 of the podcast in regards to that. We talked about there how to learn a language that's completely different from your own. So definitely go back and check that out at iwillteachyoualanguage.com/episode 10. So, Zena, I hope that helps. I think you've got lots of reasons to be positive, but it is going to take time. You shouldn't underestimate the challenge in front of you, but I think you've got lots of opportunities, and hopefully it will be a fascinating journey for you to rediscover that part of your past. And like I said, I'd love to know the experience you have if you can track down some of those old resources and if any light bulbs go off in your head. So if you would like to ask me a question, please do head over to iwillteachyoualanguage.com/ask, and you can leave a question there. I also really appreciate reviews. So if you've been enjoying the podcast, then if you could take a second to head over to iTunes and leave a review for the podcast, that's fantastic. It's hugely motivating for me to get reviews and to see you guys reacting to the podcast. If you'd like to do that, you can go to iwillteachyoualanguage.com/review. Now, at the end of every episode, I like to leave you with a resource of some kind on the topic of the show. And this one is especially for Zena and all of you guys out there who are learning Chinese. And I've put together a humongous resource page for Chinese. It is truly epic with the help of my friend John. And you should go and check that out because that's got links to everything under the sun. And you can get that. Well, I'll put a link to that in the show notes. So if you go to iwillteachyoualanguage.com/episode 89, then you'll find a link to that. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode of the podcast.
Thanks for listening to today's episode, and in case you didn't already know, I teach languages in a rather unusual way through stories. Now, stories are a great way to learn a new language because when you're engrossed in a story, you remember things more easily, and the mechanics of the language just start clicking inside your brain. It's quite something, and if you'd like to find out how you can learn a new language or improve your skills in a language that you already know and do it with the power of stories, then you should check out my free Story Learning Kit, which will teach you exactly how this method works and how you can use it yourself to learn a new language. Visit storylearning.com/podkit, that's PODKIT, to get free access. Inside, you'll find explanatory videos, masterclasses, worksheets, short stories to practice with, and much, much more. Once again, that is storylearning.com/podkit, PODKIT, and if you're lucky, you might also find a link in the podcast description or show notes of this episode.